This weekend, I ask that we take a moment and reflect on what we hear in our second reading from the book of Revelation. At the end of our reading, we hear God, the one who sat on the throne, proclaim, "Behold, I make all things new." The transformative power of God. The beginning of our reading from chapter 21 of Revelation, we hear, "I, John, saw a new heaven and a new earth. The former heaven and the former earth had passed away, and the sea was no more." These words of John can't help but evoke within us echoes of Genesis, the beginning of creation, when all things came into being. At that time, you remember we heard that the earth was a formless wasteland and darkness covered the abyss, while a mighty wind swept over the waters. What is the wind over the waters? The wind is of course, it's the Holy Spirit, It's the Spirit over the waters that brings order. From this darkness, from the turbulence and the chaos of the waters comes order and life. And then God surveys what he sees and declares it to be good. Then he makes man and woman in his divine image. In the divine image he created them, male and female, and he declares them to be very good. At the beginning of time. This is significant, for at the beginning of our second reading this weekend, we hear St. John proclaim that he has seen a vision of a new heaven and a new earth. For the former heaven and the former earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. It's not a different heaven and a different earth which he sees. It's not a different Jerusalem where his people are, but a recreated new order. God has not discarded the old. He has not chucked everything and then somehow went back to the drawing board. He has recreated and transformed the old into something new and more excellent, better. The sea which is no more is the sea of chaos. It is a sea of dissension, the sea of division, the sea of rancor, the sea which churns and brings disorder within ourselves and our environment. The turbulent sea is calmed and order comes into the world. What is the cause of the recreative act? We hear as our readings continue, "I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'God's dwelling is with the human race. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will always be with them as their God.'" It is God that accomplishes the transformation. It is the Holy Spirit which accomplishes this transformation once again. And the lack of God's presence can only bring the chaos. It is God which brings the order and new life and peace. It is through his divine presence that tears are dried, pain and mourning are vanquished, and the new order is established. It is, however, a new order composed of the original creation, which was created good. The substance, the material remains the same. It is the reordering that takes place. It's the same eyes, but eyes which now in faith are able to see what God is doing, the power of God alive. It is the same soul, but now the soul is more restful and has confidence that God really is in control. The restless longing is put aside. For many of us, that seems, I want to be in control, and we know what that does within the control issues do within our life. Put God in control, and the seas begin to calm. And then trust and have faith. In the gospel, we hear Jesus tell his disciples to love. Not simply a human love, which many times is transitory and fleeting, but a love which is divine because it reflects the forgiving and enduring love of Christ. It's not a fleeting love based on emotions or feelings, but a love which is a conscious, willful decision made visible in concrete acts. I don't know how many young couples I sit with and I work with. I do all the marriage prep myself and begin to do the numbers on how many weddings I've done. You can get an idea of how many couples I've worked with. And, with the couples, I tell them, you say, why do you, I love this person because they love me. Well, that feeling is going to change. It better change. If you're 50 and you have the same feeling, or 70 you have the same feeling, it's arrested development. There's a problem, But love is not that feeling. Love is the conscious acts. When our feelings may say do something different, the grace of God saying, you need to go in this direction. I guess it's probably the husband saying, you don't feel good, I don't feel good, but I'll go take care of the kids. You get some rest. No, yeah, I'll take care of it. A very different, it's love shown in those actions. This is the love which, by the way, wives and husbands are called, not to sentimental feelings which do change over time. The concrete love is manifest for us in the actions of Jesus. Although Jesus was forsaken by his disciples, left with only his mother, in the other gospel, the beloved disciples, and the Marys at the foot of the cross, Jesus returned to his disciples following the resurrection. And what were his first words to his disciples? After the abandonment, after the denials, what were his first words? Peace be with you. It's not, what were you thinking? It's not, I want to, sit down, we need to have a talk. It wasn't any of that. It was peace be with you. There was chaos in their lives. They were locked behind closed doors. They saw chaos all over. And Jesus came to them and said, peace be with you. And he blew on them, right? And then he sent them out to share what they had received. Jesus, who was fully human and fully divine. As fully human, you can be sure he was hurt. He had to have been upset and frustrated at that moment. He's fully human. He knew our emotions. We know he was a human. He got upset, turned over the tables of the tax collectors. But caught up in emotions, we don't often do the right thing. Caught up in emotions ruled by our heart, we humans sometimes find it hard to forgive. This reluctance to forgive creates barriers to new beginnings and new creations. The reluctance to forgive maintains the turbulence of the waters and the experience of chaos in people's lives. The reluctance to forgive can institutionalize anxiety. It can just go on and on. For the former heaven and the former earth to pass away, for the sea to be no more, requires us to live the mercy and love of Jesus Christ. It is the year of mercy that the Jubilee year of mercy that Francis has proclaimed. In this Easter season, we recognize that Jesus, risen from the dead, did not abandon those who abandoned him. Jesus did not go off and start a new church, did not gather new disciples because the former disciples run further. I've had it with you. Don't even bother. I'm going somewhere else. No, Jesus returned to his brothers and sisters and said to them, peace be with you. His merciful action, his divine action, caused those who were locked behind closed doors then to rise and eventually, as we hear in Acts, go to the ends of the universe and share what they had experienced and share what they had received. The book of Revelation, written to 7 different churches, is really written to Christians throughout time. It addresses the problem of some members of the church becoming lax in the practice of the faith. It addresses the problem of some members failing to live up to the faith and maybe going back to pagan practices. It addresses the problem of some Christians being led astray by false teachers and prophets. It recognizes that faithful Christians sometimes do suffer persecution and martyrdom and more, as we know in our time. In reality, it is written to both 7 particular churches and to Christians everywhere and throughout time, to you and us today, and to those who will follow us as well. The message of Jesus in the gospel, the message of the author of Revelation, the message in our first verse from the psalm that we heard sung is, "The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and rich in kindness." It is an invitation to new beginnings. In our first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, we hear St. Paul declare, "It is necessary for us to undergo many hardships to enter into the kingdom of heaven." This exhortation speaks to us as individuals, to us as families, and to us as a community. In a disposable society where clothes, cell phones, they're made to be disposed of. I think there's a reason why they allow water to make them not work. I've gone through a ton, The temptation is to be ready to dispose of relationships when they become difficult or distressed. The temptation is to dispose maybe of marriages, relationships with siblings, relationships with church groups, and even relationships with the church and God himself when they become difficult. The temptation is simply to move on to the next, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. Want to talk about disquiet and chaos, To abandon one group, organization for another, to leave for a different faith or whatever. All these responses don't really calm the waters. They only churn them more, but in different places. What we hear in Revelation is that God, through his mercy and love, recreates the old and makes it new. He never abandoned us, but works daily to recreate us anew and to make us a better reflection of himself revealed to us in the love and mercy of Jesus Christ. It is God's mercy and love which does this, and it is this reality to which we are called to live, which we are invited to live, to find greater peace in our life. Through Christ alive in us, we are invited to share in the life of Christ. Rejection is not the way of Christ. The way of Christ is conversion and recreation. God's dwelling place is with the human race. The one who sat on the throne declares, "Behold, I make all things new."